You know, one of the funny things as a minister, entering my third decade of ministry, is that when you have something like Christmas or Easter, or generally for those of us who attend like weddings and funerals, there are some well-trodden passages that everybody knows really well. And normally, like when you go to a wedding, if you're going to hear a little message, any guess on what passage of scripture it might come from? I was thinking 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, something like that. Often at Christmas time, you're going to hear a story about the nativity scene or something like that. Of course, on Easter, it's fashionable to talk about crucifixion and resurrection. That's pretty, right, standard fare. But I figure anybody who's here today already knows that story. It's probably why you're here. What I wanted to do is take a passage that we normally talk about at funerals, and I wanted to talk about it in a way you can't talk about it at funerals. And so today I want to read Ecclesiastes chapter 3. At funerals, we often read Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And it's weird because it has nothing to do with funerals. There's one passage in there that says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But here's the thing, that you don't die in the valley of the shadow of death. If you follow Psalm 23, you walk through it. So it's a psalm of the living. But in this passage, we often read this at funerals, but we never get a chance to talk about it because there's a bigger item that we needed to deal with in memorializing the person. So I thought we'd try something a little different today. And at Easter, I want to do a funeral passage and see how this goes. So stick with me. Let's see where we go here. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search, and a time to give up, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to mend, a time to be silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. We, in next week's Sunday school, as I mentioned, are going to be talking about the 5-year anniversary of COVID quarantine lockdowns. And one of the things that became fashionable or an awareness that people came to is a phenomenon that gets called the accordion of time. That days seemed to last forever and months went by in the snap of a finger. And they called that the accordion of time. But we've always had it with us. If you've ever been watching a movie or a TV show that you really enjoy, hours can disappear. But if you're ever stuck in a conversation that you're not enjoying, minutes feel like hours. If you've ever been on a road trip where there's tension between the people in the car, the miles go by so slowly and you feel trapped inside the vehicle. We've always had this perceived time that when things are going well, they just seem to go so quickly, right? And with little kids, and they grow up so quickly. And then they become teenagers and you think, will this ever end? It does. We've always had this accordion of time, but there was something about lockdown that accentuated it and maybe even inflamed it. And people would say it's the weirdest thing. Each day just drags. It's the same thing over and over. And then before I know it, it's spring, right? It's summer. It's Christmas. There was this weird perception of time that got warped. And the truth is, we as humans, we're actually not very good at perceiving time. We experience time well, but perceiving it is a different thing. So Several years ago, I started looking into this because as a young minister, I noticed that I didn't feel very effective, but I noticed that a lot of my people also would complain about not having enough time for the things that they said they found important or that they had put off till retirement. But as we're all well aware, retired people are some of the busiest people you'll ever meet. I know people who put things off in their 60s because they said, well, I just want to get to retirement. Then they get to retirement and it's like the pace picks up, right? When we're trying to schedule like council or different meetings, try and get on a retired person's schedule. I dare you. They are so busy. So we're not always very good at being effective with our use of time. And one of the things that I found when I was researching this by people who study such things is that we have adopted in our Western English mindset, we have adopted a way of talking about time as if it was money. And it shows up in our language. We talk about spending time. We talk about saving time or not having enough time. But you know, none of that's true, right? You can't save time, right? There's not some bank of all the shortcuts you've ever taken, and at the end of your life, you're like, oh, today, this is when I die. And they're like, but guess what? All that time you saved, you get 4 more years, right? There's no bank that saves your time. And you can't have more or less time. We all get the same amount of time. We each are roughly awake the same amount of hours in a day, some a little more, some a little less, but we all have roughly the same amount of time. There's just 24 hours in a day. There is no such thing as more or less time. You also can't spend time, right? It's not a currency. But the way that we've been taught to think about time actually fails us in a number of important ways. When we think about who we want to be in this life, and this is why I wanted to talk about this on Easter, because Easter is the perfect day to talk about something like this because it comes with the theme of hope, resurrection, forgiveness, and overcoming. So Easter provides us the opportunity of second chances and forgiveness. And so when it comes to the way we think we have spent time, it's a great opportunity for us to step back and to do some internal reflection, to say, and I'm going to use this economic language just one more time, am I spending time the way I want to? Right? I only have a certain amount of time. Is this what I wanted to do with it? Because the truth is, you can't control the future, right? But I saw a saying that has really impacted me. People can't determine their futures. They determine their habits, and their habits determine their futures. So when we have been sold, and I use that word ironically, a view of time that is money-based, economic, often what I hear from people is a frustration that either a lot of their time goes to stuff that they're not sure that they value a ton, and not a lot of time is left over for the things that they say they really find important. One of the other things that's interesting is that when it comes to time, a lot of people use the word balance. They want to come to find some balance, right? Now, what's interesting about balance, so I like riding bikes, pedal bicycles, and whenever you're on 2 wheels, whether it's motorized or human powered, balance is important. But In order for you to be balanced, you have to be moving forward, right? Because if you just try and stand still, there is no balance. And I appreciate that people they desire balance, but I find very, very few people who feel like they achieve it. Most people feel out of balance when it comes to issues of time and priorities. So in the research that I did, I actually found an analogy that has helped me tremendously over the years, and I want to give it to you to see if it might work in your situation. Instead of having the desire for balance, you set that aside, because juggling requires balance, but it's not the main thing. This picture of priorities and time of a juggler really works for me. So let me walk you through it in case you find anything helpful in it. So there are daily tasks, things that you need to touch and do every day, and we're going to call those like bowling pins, right? They're not the same shape and size, right? Because we have the big end and the little end. But generally, everyday tasks require a certain amount of concentration, a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of strength to pull off. And most people get pretty good at just keeping the bowling pins going, right? Your daily tasks, you can keep those going on a fairly consistent or predictable basis. But there are a couple variables that can show up in life that need to be adjusted for. The first is when something heavy shows up in your life. So let's say the loss of a loved one or the loss of a relationship. So that's like introducing a bowling ball into the rotation. The art at that point, if you use this metaphor, the art is that for all of the everyday tasks, right, the 3 bowling pins, you actually need to send them higher up in the air, knowing you're going to touch them less frequently because something heavy has been introduced into your situation. So the art is to release them higher in the air, and you can sort of let your motor skills, your muscle memory handle that. Because what you need to do in that moment is you need to turn your focus to receive the heaviness of what has been introduced, the strength that it takes to transfer it, and then to release it again. So just know when something heavy gets introduced in your life, your daily routine is going to change. There is a wisdom in knowing what time it is and what time it's for. It's the beauty of this reminder in Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything, but there's also a wisdom to know what it's time for. When something heavy comes into your life, it's going to require your focus, your strength, and your energy. So you're not able to keep doing everything you were doing previously. Okay? Here's a second kind of variable. Sometimes something dangerous gets introduced into your situation. Maybe like a temptation to cheat on your partner, or towards a substance that you have recovered from, or something else. But something dangerous gets introduced. This is like introducing a hatchet or a machete, let's go with, to the rotation. And when there is something dangerous present in your life, whether that is fear or despair, depression, temptation, whatever it is, when that comes into your life, you're going to have to release those everyday things, because wisdom says that when there is something dangerous present, it needs to be dealt with well. You want to make sure that you get that machete by the handle and not the blade. So there's a focus that's needed. So in the first variable, there's a strength and a weightiness. But when something dangerous comes into your life, there is a focus that moment asks for. So you're not going to be able to pay attention to the everyday things like you used to. You're just not. Something else requires your attention. Now here's the big one. From time to time, something comes in our life that is both heavy and dangerous. We're going to call this a chainsaw. Now, I don't recommend juggling with chainsaws. They're both heavy and dangerous. But you know, when you get sick, like if an illness comes into your life, or something really scary or overwhelming, there is an appropriateness to say, you know what, this thing can really do some damage, and I need to maybe put down one of these pins, one of these other things, the daily stuff, because I got to focus on this. I've got 3 bowling pins, a bowling ball, a machete, and now this thing. I can't keep all of this afloat all the time. The way that we conceive of time, I understand the desire for balance. I just meet very few people who get it. And I understand the attractiveness of the language surrounding the economy of time. But the truth is that how you spend time, you never save time, and there's no more or less time. So here's what I'd like you to consider today. I would like to ask you to stop saying the phrase, I don't have time. It's not true. You have all the time in the world. So stop saying, I don't have time. And instead, ask yourself a question. What is it time for? What's it time for? Look, you're not getting any younger. None of us are. And there are things that I believe God's Spirit has placed in your heart as desires. It might be to learn another language. It might be to invest in a nonprofit. It might be to serve in some capacity. It might be to heal up a relationship. It might be to overcome a bad habit or an addiction. But we're not doing ourselves any favors when we say, I don't have time for it. Sure you do. You're just spending it on something else. So instead, step back and have a heartfelt conversation, a heart-to-heart with yourself, and say, what is it time for? It might be that you've always wanted to learn about a certain subject. Or maybe it's to take your own personal development seriously. Some of you have always wanted to be maybe more spiritual. And so there's some spiritual practices that might bear good fruit in your life. But if you say, I don't have time for that, the question becomes, what time is it? Will it ever be time for it? So I want you to consider this. Instead of saying, I don't have time, ask yourself, what's it time for? Let's sit with this for a second. If anything has come to your mind or your heart, I'm just going to invite you to either write it on the back of this handout or on the yellow cards that are in the pew in front of you, and then carry it with you as a reminder Listen, if there's something in your spirit right now, if there's something your heart desires, it's time. That's what it's time for. Take it seriously. You're being called to this, and you have time for it. Amen? Okay. I'm going to invite Joel to come. Will you please stand as you're able? We're going to bless each other with this song, and then Linda will give us the benediction.